Sentinels ended up going 0-2 in their group at VCT Champions Paris, making their 2025 season come to a pretty unceremonious end. With high expectations heading into the year with new young guns brought into the team in both Narrate and Bane, this team just wasn't able to repeat the success of the 2024 roster. So today we're going to look at their performance at Champions Paris and talk about what went wrong. So this is the board we have today. We have the 2 matches that they played as well as a bunch of stats. Now at some point during the offseason I'll be doing a deeper dive on this team talking about their year as a whole, but I figured since they just went out of champs, let's talk about that performance specifically. Because while they did technically make both matches close, winning map 1 against both Giant X and XLG, it did overall feel like these 2 matches were a representation of Sentinels' problems all year. Obviously it's really hard to replace both Tens and Saucy, but clearly those losses have really handicapped this team, and while the new additions in Narrate and Bank both had their moments throughout the year, it just did not translate into the same results, and now going out at group stage, that is a huge disappointment for this team, especially because it looked like at Toronto they were on a good trajectory. They did have a decent run at Toronto, looking really good in the Swiss stage, a definite improvement from their performance at Bangkok where they went out in that Swiss stage. But at Champs this year we saw yet another step back at the international level. It is really weird how this team ended up performing, because after Toronto they went on a good run in their group. During stage 2 I had them at the number 1 spot on my America's Power Rankings for a lot of the stage 2, but I did drop them down after their playoff performance where they didn't make the grand final. They went out in top 4. They did make it to the lower final, but then they got punked by Energy, a team that does look pretty good admittedly, but still Sentinels were meant to be better. We saw comments from Sentinels fans all throughout the stage that this team was the best in the Americas, and then playoffs happened, they fall short, but now they're in Champions so it doesn't matter, and the team has fallen short yet again. Looking at their game versus Giant X, it did look like it was going to be a quick and swift victory for Sentinels, winning Corrode 13-6. So a very strong performance on the newest map in the game, a map that they have been very solid on. But then we go to Sunset, a map that used to be one of their best as well. It used to be the staple of their map pool in 2024. It was Lotus, Sunset. You could not beat this team on those 2 maps. But evidently this version of Sentinels just doesn't have that same swagger. They ended up losing Sunset 13-4, and admittedly it is a very good map for Giant X as well, but at the very least Sentinels fans would hope that they would at least be able to make that map look competitive. But they got dominated on that one. Then they go on to Haven, a map that they did end up going even on in 2025, 6 wins, 6 losses, but this is one of those losses, and they lose this one 13-9. And Sentinels started that map with the lead, winning the first 6 rounds in a row, but after a timeout from the Giant X coaching staff, they locked in and were just able to just push the pace onto Sentinels, and Sentinels just didn't have an answer, and that knocked them down to the lower stage. Now what is interesting about these 2 games is the individual performances, because overall we're seeing a lot of underperforming, but the only player I can't say that about is John QT. I saw some tweets online that said that Zekken was carrying at Champs. No, Zekken didn't really have a good tournament at all in my opinion, but I would like to put some respect on John QT's name, who absolutely was carrying this team. In this game versus Giant X, 46, 35, and 17 for plus 11. Sure, you can maybe question his IGLing at this tournament, but look at his individual performance. He was doing everything he could. And looking at the bottom of the leaderboard for Sentinels, we have Zelsis, who went 28, 39, and 16 for minus 11. And we'll get to more about talking about the individual players later on, but Zelsis, it's just disappointing to see that while he has had some really big moments at internationals before for Sentinels, in 2025, there just wasn't as many of those you would have liked. So they get knocked down to the lower bracket, but now they're playing against XLG, a team that they are familiar with and a team that they've beating them both at Masters Toronto as well as Esports World Cup. So if you're Sentinels fans, you're hoping that this should be a pretty easy matchup for them. XLG is a team that did look really good in stage 1, but after a bit of roster chaos for them, just didn't really look the same, and they got dominated by Paper X. So this is a pretty best case scenario for Sentinels for the lower bracket, and yet again at the start it looked like this was going to be a good match from Sentinels. Playing on Abyss, a map that we haven't seen them on in a very long time, they ended up winning this one 13-10, so it was close. XLG did have their moments and could have won this one, but Sentinels were able to get this one done. And then you're moving on to Lotus. Again, a map that Sentinels have historically been quite good on. But almost immediately it ended up going pretty poorly for Sentinels. While they did win the first 2 rounds of this match, they then lost their bonus, and XLG were just able to steamroll from there and ended up going up 9-3 at the half. But Sentinels historically have been pretty good at coming back from big deficits. They are a bit of a heart attack team in that way. They're able to go down, but able to push through and get that comeback. At least that was a staple of the 2024 roster. And to Sentinels' credit, they almost did it. They won the first 5 rounds of the second half to put them back in this one. They then lost 3 in a row to go down 12-8, but then they nearly tied the game, but they just could not bring this one to overtime. XLG take Lotus. If they had performed even just a little bit better in the first half, maybe they end up tying this one and getting a 2-0 victory over XLG. But instead, it seemed like as soon as the comeback was shut down, Sentinels were just kind of out of it. Because then we move on to Haven, which does have a very close first half. They still ended the half with Sentinels down by 2, 7-5 for XLG. And then yet again, Sentinels win the pistol, they win the anti-eco, but yet again cannot convert that bonus, and XLG go on a little streak. After those first 2 rounds of the half, Sentinels only able to get 1 more win on their attack side. XLG winning Haven 13-8, Sentinels just looking not as motivated as they used to, didn't have the same comeback energy that they showed even in the previous map. And that ends their run at Champions Paris in the group stage. John QT, yet again, doing everything he can on an individual level, 39, 40, and 17 for -1. But looking at the bottom of the leaderboard, we have Bang, who went 38, 46, and 22 for -8. So 2 pretty disappointing games from Sentinels at this tournament against 2 pretty good opponents overall, but opponents that you would definitely think heading into this tournament they were expected to beat. I think Giant X looks a lot better than what I personally thought they were going to be. But XLG, I really thought even after that first map that Sentinels were going to be able to make quick work of them like they've done in the past. But that's just not what happened. XLG were fighting for a lot more. They have to go farther than Dragon Ranger Gaming to even continue in the VCT, so that definitely motivated them. It's not even just about the trophy for them, it's about being able to play in Tier 1. And that hunger is something that Sentinels just have not really had this year. At times it would show up, but it seemed like anytime something went wrong for this team, it really just boomed them. And that is where the losses of both Tens and Saucy comes in. I think for the mental side, Saucy was pretty huge for that. And just on an individual performance side, Tens was just such an amazing player. He really set the tempo for this team in 2024. He was such an amazing player last year. And he was a great duo with Zekken, something that Zekken has desperately missed this year. Narrate just not able to fill that hole as that secondary fragger. At times he did fill that hole, but in terms of the chemistry between him and Zekken, it just wasn't the same as it was with Tens. Which is fair. I'm not saying that it has to be for Narrate to be a valuable player. Narrate, overall in 2025, might have been their highest performing player. But you can have teams that have a lot of good players, but the combination just doesn't end up fitting. And is that the case with Sentinels? It does seem that way. Looking at their overall stats on attack and defense, on attack they had a 49% win percentage, 34 rounds won to 35 loss, so not the worst differential there. But then we look at their defense side and things do get worse. 42% win percentage, 24 rounds won to 33 loss. Yes, they are small numbers, so the percentages are going to be worse than it would be if they went further in the tournament, but that's what happens when you go out in groups. So let's look at these players on an individual basis and look at their performance at this tournament. As I said earlier, there was a lot of underperforming on this team, especially from some of their star players that you would hope would be able to have some big games to get their teams back in it, but John QT was really the only one performing to a high level. He had a rating of 1.14, a kills per round of 0.67, he had 85 kills, 75 deaths, 34 assists for a KD ratio of 1.13, and the agents he played were Cypher, Sova, and Viper. As I also said earlier, yeah, maybe you can question his IGL and his leadership, but I would put the team systems a bit more on the coaching staff. So I would put that more on Kaplan than John QT, not to throw Kaplan under the bus, but John QT, I do think it's a very good IGL. He performs very well. He's a great fragging IGL, and he was leading the way for this team this entire tournament. But unfortunately, when some of your star players are really underperforming, it's hard to lead a team to victory. Which brings me to Zekken, a player that I definitely was disappointed in at this tournament. Not that he was the main problem, not that everything is to blame on him. I will never blame a team going out early on one player. But Zekken is expected to be a star player. He's expected to be one of the best duelists in the entire world. world. At his peak, he can be the best duelist in the entire world. We've seen that from him. But at Champions, it just seemed like he wasn't hitting his shots. He wasn't playing with as much confidence as he usually does. It seemed like his really aggressive style of play did kind of put him into pretty bad spots, and he ended up with some pretty mediocre stats overall. He had a rating of 0.98, a kills per round of 0.75, so that is highest on the team for kills per round, but as a duelist player that is expected. He had 94 kills, 100 deaths, 39 assists for a KD ratio of 0.94. He was playing 3 duelists during the tournament, Yoru, Raze, as well as Neon. It really just seemed like he was struggling to find his way, and when he was struggling, no one else on the team aside from John was really stepping up to the plate to help him out. Second is a phenomenal player, but I do believe he needs a strong support system around him for him to play at his peak. And that's what he had in 2024 with TENS, and he just didn't have it this year. And I do think that this year is absolutely a huge learning experience for him. Now that he's had 1 year without TENS under his belt, I think for 2026 he should be looking to really improve on an individual level so that he can be that player that we've seen from him before, where he's able to elevate his game to just take over matches. It's not like he didn't do that in 2025, but not as much as you would have liked. Moving on, we have Narrate. Now, as I said earlier, from an overall perspective, Narrate might be Sentinel's best performer in 2025. He had very good stats domestically, and even in some matches that they lost, he did put up good numbers. But at Champs, the biggest tournament of his career thus far, he just did not show that killer instinct. He ended up with a 0.95 rating, a kills per round of 0.63, 79 kills, 91 deaths, 49 assists for KD ratio of 0.87. So not even getting over 0.90, that's not what you want from a player you did expect to come in and frag out. He was playing Fade, Sova, and a bit of Omen during this tournament as well, and actually doing a pretty good job on that agent on Abyss. But overall, I don't really see Narrate as an effective smokes player, but hey, maybe that ends up being his calling. Narrate is a good player. There's discussions that he lets his emotions get to him. I don't think that was the problem for him in this tournament per se, but it definitely felt like when the pressure got a lot, he tended to crumble a bit. And he's still young, it's his first Champs, he can bounce back for sure, but are Sentinels going to want to take that risk for 2026? We will see. Moving on, we have Zelsis, a player who has had some very good performances at internationals before. He is their resident vibes merchant, he's very big for the Sentinels brand, but as an individual player, 2025 has been pretty rough for him. And Champions, a tournament that last year he did do a good job at for sure. Definitely not fragging out more than his teammates or being one of the main reasons why his team did make top 4 at Champs last year, but he was an effective player and huge for the mental. At this tournament, he tried to keep up the mental game, but has it not been resonating with some of the new additions to the team in Narian and Bane, and is his individual performance just a bit too low now for that to be worth it to keep him on the roster? He did end up having a rating of 0.80, a kills per round of 0.54. He went 68, 88, and 34 for 0.77, and he was playing an Initiator Sentinel Flex, playing Breach, Killjoy, Vise, and KO. I do think Zelsis is a good player, and I understand his value to this team. I'm not saying I'm calling for him to be dropped or anything, but it is a question that the Sentinels management are going to have to ask themselves. Does Zelsis still have what it takes to be a tier 1 player? And if the answer to that is no, or at least not as much as you would want, do you keep him on as the vibes merchant because you find that very valuable? Or is it time to try to find another person to do that? That is going to be a very interesting decision, whatever they decide from Sentinels. Moving on, we have Bang, a man who definitely had a very disappointing Champions. Bang is a player who's been around for a bit at this point, but still is pretty young. It is the first time he's played all 3 international tournaments, being on 100 Thieves. Yeah, that happens. He only made, I think, 2 with them. But on Sentinels, I thought the addition of Bang was going to be something pretty huge for them. Not that he was going to replace the play of TENS or anything coming in as the new smokes player, but I thought he was going to give them a valuable new look, and he's very good in clutch situations. And while we did see that at times, at Champions, that was not there. He ended up having a rating of 0.79, lowest on the team, a kills per round of 0.53, also lowest on the team, 67 kills, 85 deaths, 37 assists for key ratio of 0.79, and he played Omen and Astra. He's a resident smokes player, makes sense. Bang is definitely an interesting case. He was one of the most valuable members of that 100 Thieves roster on his time there. On Sentinels, it hasn't been as fruitful as it was on that team, but was he put in the right situations? Was there more expected of him that he just can't reach? Did he crumble under the pressure? Whatever ended up happening, it just did not seem to work at Champions Paris. Now, as I said, I do plan on doing a bit of a deeper dive into Sentinels later in the offseason, so this is a question I'll probably ask in that video as well, but I want to talk about what would you do if you were Sentinels management? You have 3 players with expiring contracts, Zellsis, Zekin, and JonQT. The last remaining 3 from the 2024 roster, JonQT's your IGL, you probably want to keep him. He's very good individually, his IGLing is usually quite good. Or maybe do you think about doing a different look for IGL, finding someone new, but are you going to be able to find someone that performs as well individually as JonQT does? I think they probably want to keep him, but when it comes to Zekin and Zellsis, as I already talked about Zellsis, can he still play at a tier 1 level? He definitely can at times, but how consistently at this point in his career? He's also big for the Sentinels brand. He's sold them a lot of bundles, so do you want to keep him as like a content creator or something? He's the biggest question mark to me. But then there's Zekin. Now, I know Sentinel fans aren't going to want to hear this, but let me just throw it out there. Do you not re-sign Zekin, maybe bring up Redux from your academy team, or look for a different duelist player? I personally don't think they should. I think they should try to keep Zekin, but as I just brought up, Redux is waiting. He's been playing on Cuber Academy all year, and you signed him to be your sub. Now, he didn't end up subbing in at any point during the year, but he played very well on Cuber Academy, but he is primarily a duelist player, so if you want him in the main roster, you might have to get rid of Zekin. Or do you move Zekin to Initiator, a role he's played before, but as soon as he made the switch to Duelist, he performed a lot better. So can he go back to that role, or do you hope that double Duelist stays viable for a few years? Again, Zekin at his best can be the best Duelist in the world, but is that time past at this point? And do Sentinels think he can get back to that? Or do you keep all 3 of them and then find replacements for Narrate and Bang, who are both signed till next season, but this is esports, that barely means anything. And then who do you look at to replace them? Again, do you bring up people from Academy, or do you look at free agents? We will talk about what Sentinels need to do as a roster in a more in-depth way in that future video, but for now, I'm posing that question: what would you do if you were Sentinels manager? If you were Rob Moore, if you were Kaplan, do you end up making a change at coaching? Is it time for a new look? Then Kaplan, who knows? Anyways, just throwing that into the ring there. Let me know in the comment section down below. How do you feel about Sentinels' performance at Champs this year? Let me know all that and more in the comment section down below. Please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.